Hello. Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome to this industry talk, Filming the Other, Privilege or Entitlement. So, yes, filming the other. This is, of course, like the core business of most documentary filmmakers. But only since the last couple of years, the awareness is growing that the perspectives, the gaze and the privilege of the filmmaker should really be taken into account and are sometimes highly problematic. And moreover, the unequal economic power structures are also a stubborn reality in the world of documentary filmmaking. Who has the rights, who has the means, and who has the platform to film the other? So, or as Orwa Nirabia, the director of this festival, stated recently, who are the ones who reflect? Whose vision on the world are we seeing? Much of what we see as progressive is in reality still post-colonialism in disguise. So my name is Mirthe Frese and I'm your moderator this afternoon, and I was thinking that one of my first aha moments in this discussion of filming the other was actually at IDFA. It was with the film Enjoy Poverty 3 by Renzo Martens. It was a couple of years ago the opening film. I don't know if some of you saw it. And not only did he make his own privileged position really part of the film, but there's also this scene which I will never forget. So the film is set in Congo, and he's actually kind of explaining to or teaching Congolese wedding photographers that they could better get into the business of photographing poverty, because that makes a lot of money, and photographing weddings doesn't. So they're going to do that, they're doing that, and with their pictures they go to this very big international NGO, but they are basically refused, and they literally say in their face, like, we only work with Western photographers. So these people weren't even allowed to tell their own stories. So I think, luckily, already much has changed. But there's also still a lot of work to be done. So this afternoon I will have a conversation with filmmakers Kivu Ruhorahoza and Mischa Hedinger, whose films are both at the festival and they relate entirely to the subject. And also with cultural anthropologist Sinan Cankaya. And we're going to talk on working methods, the unequal power structures, and like the strategies for the future. But before I talk to them, I also always really like to know who I have in the audience, why you're here, what your expectations are, so I can take them into account. So let's ask, why did you choose this talk?
Oh, well, I'm in the process of making a documentary myself. And it's about an Indonesian woman who raises a gibbon ape as her own child. And she has kept that gibbon from the zoo where she worked. So she kept it apart. And yeah, I'm wondering, I'm from Indonesian descent, but obviously also Dutch. So yeah, I was wondering how honest am I, you know?
Clear, thank you. Do you, sir, have any already specific thoughts on this subject?
That I need to be careful, very self-conscious of myself.
Why?
Well, in who I am versus my subjects, that I need to sort of think about how they perceive me and also how I perceive them, and not to, and also I think we're always looking at people from our own value set, and I prefer to be able to look at it from their value set.
Do you find that hard? Do you think you always succeed?
Normally I feel quite confident until I hear people like the ones I'm about to hear who are going to make me very self-conscious that I am most probably bigoted and looking at it totally from my point of view and being arrogant in my approach. That's what
you expect of this afternoon.
Yeah, that it will be a reality check for me. It will be, it will be a self-improvement exercise, put it that way.
Good, thank you. Maybe here. Can I ask you what you expect of this talk or your thoughts?
I'm actually here. Yeah, I mean, I have a lot. I think I'll talk after.
You talk after. Oh, well. I will get back to you at the end, yeah? Oh, no. At the bar, I will come to you. Yes, okay, yeah, I'm going to do that. Okay, so without further ado, I will introduce my guests. So, please give a warm round of applause for Kivu Ruhorahoza, Mischa Hedinger, and Sinan Cankaya. Yes. Give you all a mic. It's here. You take that mic. So, welcome, gentlemen. I'm going to introduce you all by a clip of your work or a clip of a film that you're in. And I would like to start with you, Kivu. Also some background. You are an award-winning Rwandan filmmaker. And your work has been showcased on numerous big festivals, also IDFA before. And your feature film was Things of the Aimless Wanderer, if I'm correct, Grey Matter, and the short film Anthropology and Tourism in the Wake of a Romantic Breakup. And love the title. And so now you're here for the premiere of your film, which is called EUROPA, based on a true story. And I really encourage you to see it as a whole, because we're going to show a clip, and I heard you don't really like to show this kind of fragment pieces from your work, so we're happy that we're allowed to do that. And what you will see is a part of a carnival in Notting Hill, and I just want to show it. So clip 1, please.
Bruce's resentment about what London and the UK had become often culminated in Notting Hill Carnival. Susie had respectfully challenged me about my ability to make a black British film. She was right. I understood very little of what is often called black culture, black British culture. What legitimacy did I have to tell stories of non-African blacks or any other blacks of Great Britain whose experiences were so opaque to me? Susie also argued that the Notting Hill Carnival was a major nuisance for the local residents. She claimed that there had been an 86% rise in crime since 2010. She, just like my character Bruce, lived in Notting Hill. For the 2017 edition, the police started using advanced facial recognition software to scan carnival goers, therefore profiling thousands using intrusive real-time biometric surveillance for which there is no legal basis, no accountability or democratic consent. This controversial technology was confirmed by the American FBI to have significant issues in accurately identifying black people. It was never used at many British summer festivals considered to be white. The 2017 Glastonbury Music Festival, attended by 150,000 people, saw 71 arrested. In comparison, 316 were arrested at the Notting Hill Carnival, which was attended by an estimated 2 million. Susie kept insisting that the carnival was underfunded and overcrowded. Only months ago, a culture of cost-cutting and flagrant disdain for the safety of the poor had caused the Grenfell tragedy. Legal advisors agreed on the fact that the Metropolitan Police and the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, one of the richest and whitest in the country, bore the statutory responsibility for public safety and not the Carnival Organising Committee. And Susie agrees that it would be disastrous for the image of the city if the carnival was knocked off the streets of Notting Hill to some central London pub.
Yes, so you kind of made a film that is a lot. It's also a fiction film. It's anthropological research, and this is kind of a anthropological research of the British people, and then especially the African British community. And then in the film, you are asked, like, can you, as an outsider, film this community, understand this community? So, what are your thoughts on filming the other? in this case, the British African community. Do you feel it's your right to film them, or is it a privilege to film them?
I think it's both. I think it's my right. I have the right to have an opinion on matters of the world and on communities of the world, as long as I do my homework, and as long as I understand and acknowledge my impossibility of fully understanding these communities and portraying them accurately. If I'm humble enough to, and then if I make clear my inability to grasp the nuances of communities that I didn't grow up with or that I don't belong to, I think it gives me the right to point my camera to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but is that prerequisite?
Yeah, I wanted to discuss this later, but I'm going to ask it now anyway. So you literally discuss it in the film, you know, can I or can I not? Should a director, when he makes the choice to film the other, always makes it so clear, you know, what his own position and background is, or can you also do it in another way by not saying it, or should you really come out?
I think for this film, I needed to make it clear, and then not just what I'm showing, but also how I wanted people to understand my methodology. So, for example, this section of the film was I invited a female camera person to shoot it for me, because I knew that Notting Hill Carnival, it really is a celebration of black beauty in white spaces. It's occupying, all of a sudden there's this large community that claims the right, and that gives itself the right to occupy one of the richest neighborhood in London. And then I was having doubts, like, how am I going to film these black bodies that are like 90% undressed, and then I took the risk.
Like your male gaze with regard to the sexuality of it.
Yeah. But also the men, because I mean we sometimes filmmakers sexualize male bodies as well without realizing it. Yeah. And so I took that risk, and then because I felt like it could be interesting, but at the same time I didn't want to invite a black British woman to film it. I invited a black French half-London woman to do that, just to see how she would direct the camera. So I'm very much aware of those things.
So it's it's also really about even the crew you pick, of course, to make the whole film with. It's not only you as a director.
No,
it goes
just
much
me.
further.
Yeah. And then I had to make it clear with my crew. We had a meeting before, and like, we're going to make a film. I don't belong here. I don't understand black British culture. I understand French Belgian culture better. Yeah,
clear. Thank you for now. Sinan Cankaya, you're a cultural anthropologist. You're currently writing or finishing, I think, the book, which is called My Countless Identities. And we ask you, because of your expertise, but also because you're actually in a documentary. And I want to show a clip, and therefore I have to tell a little bit of background. The documentary is called Back to the Akbar Street. It's a street here in Amsterdam. So 20 years ago, a renowned Dutch journalist went to this street, like neighborhood, because it had underwent like this so-called huge transformation. It used to be like white working class, and then lots of migrants were moving in from mostly Turkish and Moroccan background, and he kind of made a film about the transformation. And then 20 years later he goes back because there's another transformation going on, like now like white liberal progressive people are coming in, but he looks with Sinan to the old and the new film and asks him to reflect on the film, and we're gonna watch a clip.
Heel veel. Mentaliteit alleen al.
Oh ja?
Vroeger had je veel meer respect voor elkaar. Er werd aangesproken met u en niet met jij en jou.
Dankjewel oma Klaas, dankjewel tante Trace, dankjewel tante Mien. Zo ging dat vroeger. Als je het nu hoort, word je afgekafferd door zo'n snotneus aan de overkant.
Ja.
Zegt u daar eigenlijk ook mee dat de saamhorigheid verdwenen is?
Ja, tuurlijk.
Heel erg.
Ja. Maar dat komt omdat je er een veel te gemengde bevolking hebt gekregen.
Ja, cultuur versteld.
Ja.
De Nederlandse burger of de Hollander die komt er niet eens voorheen. Een werkman die kan niet eens een huis krijgen. Het is belachelijk dat je 16 jaar moet wachten als een gezinslid. Voordat je eindelijk in aanmerking komt voor een woning. Maar ik vind, of je komt in Nederland weer Nederland. Maar je krijgt geen 2 pence.
Wij betalen alles. Ja? Jaren betalen we al. En we komen binnen, ze worden geholpen. Jij staat aan de zijkant. Ik maak met de dokter ook mee. Ik zit in de dokter in de wachtkamer. 2 Hollanders en de rest is allemaal buitenlanders.
Ik spreek af met Sinan Cankaya. Hij is cultureel antropoloog en woont in de wijk. Hoe kijkt hij naar de problemen die nu, maar ook toen al werden benoemd?
Maar is dat nou volstrekt overschat in de jaren 80 en 70, dat zou lukken met die integratie?
We hebben nou pas meegemaakt met dat rotautopeetje, die Turkerinnen.
Wat waren dat?
Turkerinnen.
Maar wie heeft dat verkeerd ingezien?
Ja, ik denk wij allemaal.
Wij allemaal?
Ja.
Ja.
Wat zie je?
Ik zie een heleboel. Het is eigenlijk fascinerend om te zien dat in plaats van naar de Akbarstraat kijken als een wijk waar als gevolg van deindustrialisatie, als gevolg van gebrekkig onderhoud aan woningen, waardoor witte bewoners al vertrokken, omdat zij ook zagen dat er sprake was van een gebrekkige sociale cohesie. Het verenigingsleven verdween als gevolg daarvan. En dat alles werd geprojecteerd op migranten die er kwamen wonen. Niet omdat zij dat nou zo graag wilden. Die mensen die hadden helemaal geen keus. Het was een verpauperde wijk. En de armere mensen, inmiddels migranten, die trokken naar die wijk. Ja. En vervolgens zie je dus dat allerlei problemen op die groepen werden geprojecteerd. En ik vind het een gemiste kans.
Dus eigenlijk neem je mij in de houtgreep. Jij zegt, jij bent gaan meehuilen met de wolven in het bos. Beginnend bij Bolkestein.
Ja.
En vervolgens Scheffer.
Dat is eigenlijk wat ik zeg.
En jij bent met die stomme documentaire van jullie... zijn heel eenzijdig in die, zoals dat zo verschrikkelijk heet... in dat frame gelopen.
Ja, orientalistisch zelfs. Ook de muziekjes onder sommige fragmenten...
Terwijl het gewoon een sociaal-economisch vraagstuk is.
Ja, en het verbaast mij ook.
Zullen we de volgende pakken? Of heb je nog eentje?
Nee, maar kijk, het gaat mij ook niet om jou.
Nee, maar dat...
Het gaat mij wel om de rol die de documentaire heeft gespeeld... in de publieke verbeelding over dit soort wijken. En dat neem ik heel erg serieus.
Nou, dat is een Afrikaanse luid.
Hoor je dat? Hoor je dat?
Maar ja, als je natuurlijk James Last eronder zet, is het even gek.
I rest my case. Felix?
Yes, thank you for this. So Sinan, to introduce you, why is this discussion currently not only so important, but also so charged? Is it to you? Because I think you're having these talks for maybe already 10 years. Mm-hmm. Does it feel more charged than 10 years ago or not?
I think you could say that these discussions are charged, but then the question becomes charged to whom? And I think that, let's say, historically dominant groups think or feel that the tables are turned and that this identity debate or cultural topics, etc., that they are charged. Whereas, I think that what we're going through is also a situation, if I stick to the Netherlands at least, wherein you see that second, third generation migrants, youth, that they themselves, they're talking back. and they do not identify with these media images in newspapers, in films, in documentaries, and they are talking back to the groups who used to make these cultural products, whether it's a documentary, whether it's also research. I says I'm coming from academia, so that is changing, and you could also say that there's what we're going through is that I'm deliberately interpreting it now from one identity axis, but white people also go through a identity crisis right now because of the discrepancy between their self-image and how, for instance, youth or minorities are talking back to them. But just to complicate that immediately, I think, also what this gentleman in the audience said, for instance. I know it was jokingly said, but I think this is a sentiment right now, this feeling of being self-conscious, etc. I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing. I think that is actually an opportunity to break through taken for granted thoughts and ideas, and that I always say that discomfort can be productive. And just to mention one discomfort I am feeling right now is that we are men, for instance, and that there are no women. Yeah.
That's
here.
The only reason they asked me to do. Yeah.
So
no, it's not.
And at the same time, I'm hearing Kivu saying. So I think it's important to approach this immediately also from different multiple identities and axes of identity, where you just said that as a male filmmaker, it's all there's this chance of sexualizing male and female bodies as well. So it's important to take all of this into account. Coming back to the question, I see this tension, but I would say, yeah, it's
productive. That's what I really keep.
It can be productive if channeled
yeah.
and facilitated and mediated.
Yeah.
And then again, maybe it doesn't need to be channeled. Maybe disruption is very good as well.
Okay, let's procrastinate on that. Then to my last person on the couch, Mischa Hedinger. You are a filmmaker and editor from Switzerland. And in 2013 you realized the documentary Assessment. And now you are here with this film African Mirror. It premiered, I think, in Berlin this year. So this film is a collage film, it is called, and voiced over correspondence from the Swiss documentary filmmaker Rui Guardi's archive. Rui Guardi. And it is footage shot in the 1950s. So, right or not?
There's footage from the 50s till the 80s in this
film.
Till
the 80s in this film. And Gandhi, he films in Cameroon mostly, and he compares the people of Cameroon with the mountain people of his own homeland. And I think it's really this traditional way of how almost not only Cameroon but Africa was portrayed as a whole in Europe. And I first want to show a clip and then we're going to talk about it, African Mirror.
Zu meiner Freude ist mein Kameramanns Binden ebenfalls gepackt und begeistert. Mit Missionar Eichenberger zusammen sind wir nun 4 Assistenten. Gute Tonaufnahmen von Roland. Fritz nimmt mit der zweiten Kamera auf, gleichzeitig von rechts und links. So wird man wunderbar schneiden können. Ich bin ungeheuer gespannt. Normal-Kinoformat, Breitleinwand. Zbinden hat am Wasserloch eine Schäkerszene komponiert. Junger Mann, der auf dem Baum sitzt und Früchte pflückt. Mädchen kommt zum Brunnen, sieht ihn nicht, er wirft mit Äpfelchen nach ihr. Zuerst mit dem Burschen gedreht, Sohn des Chefs. Munterer und hübscher Bursche. Aber nach der 3. oder 4. Einstellung bei den Wiederholungen sagt er einfach Nein und will nicht mehr. Das Mädchen haben wir vorher sorgfältig ausgesucht. Es verspricht zu kommen, kommt dann am Nachmittag aber nicht. Jetzt haben wir Stars angestellt. Burschen aus Sulede, ein wenig zivilisiert, einige Brocken Französisch verstehend, aber nicht sprechend. In Sulede spazieren sie in Shorts und Leibchen und Turnschuhen herum, verwandeln sich hier hinten in nackte Matakam. Mit ihnen sind dann gestellte Szenen leicht zu machen.
Yeah, so Mischa, why in 2019, in this day, where you wanted to make this film?
I think there are different reasons,
Yeah.
but one of them was to research like the colonial past of a country with no colonies, like
Switzerland.
Like Switzerland.
Yeah.
So there was always this talk about we don't have anything to do with colonialism, and especially in Switzerland, it's always about that we're neutral and all that stuff. And I was really interested to search for like what Switzerland has to do with colonialism, and also image making as some kind of colonialism, and this is one of the goals. But it also had to do with me going to several West African countries, and I also lived in Burkina Faso for half a year, and I did some small films for an NGO, and as a white filmmaker being there and just filming people and cultures that I don't really understood that well, and this made me uneasy and made me think about like also the tradition of these white people going to African countries, filming there, researching stuff, doing stuff, and I wanted to know more about like this white history of this white gaze on the African continent, and this guy Rui Guardi, he was really well known in Switzerland from the 50s to the 70s, and for my parents' generation he was quite important.
And I assume also his work, you mean, so also the images.
Yeah, the images. In a way, he was the guy that explained the African continent to Switzerland, and his archive is really huge, and I wanted to try to like deconstruct his work and his images and the thoughts that are behind these images.
Yeah. So, do you see the work of Guardi as this kind of ghost from the past, or are still the same kind of mechanisms in place, you think?
I think it's hard to say, but in a way, I think it's a ghost that these ideas and images are like ghosts still haunting us in a way. I wouldn't have done the film if I would think this has nothing to do with our present time.
Yeah.
But also in the film, because it's completely archive based, I didn't shoot one single scene, and it ends around the early 90s. So I didn't do any links to the present time. But the links are created in the mind of the audience, and I think it is quite interesting what happens there. And didn't want to force too many things, but yeah, of course there are still stuff that is around, but maybe more subtle or articulated in a different way. And yeah,
Sinan and Kivu, when you see this clip, and then how much harm can film do? Like what Mischa says, I wanted to really show the image side of colonialism, or that. What if you see this? Yeah.
Well, again, I didn't hear the name of the person.
Rui Guardi.
Rui Guardi. I don't know how much authority he has, but already as a white person with a camera portraying these community in Sulele, I'm sure there's a little chunk of Switzerland that immediately kind of had their like set in stone image of that community. And I mean, I'm from Rwanda, and there's so many questions that get asked around the world, and then those questions they all find their source in one film, Hotel Rwanda.
Really?
And yeah. I could meet somebody. I was in Mexico, like in Pachuca. It's a small town in Mexico, and then people were telling me about Hotel Rwanda, and then they were saying things, and then they were talking about the accents, and then but the film was shot in South Africa, and then so films can a film can make me spend like 5 years trying to produce counter narratives and as a film can say that all Rwandans have heads that are shaped this way, and I'll spend 10 years trying to prove that our heads are not shaped that way. And then just like Toni Morrison said, I mean, these things make us waste so much time trying to fix them.
Yeah. What were your thoughts when you saw this?
I see the connection also with the documentary, for instance, Felix Rothenberg made 20 years ago on the Akbarstraat. And I remember this documentary very well. And also the role it played in, let's say, the Dutch discourse on these disadvantaged neighborhoods with a lot of ethnic minorities, where all these social problems were culminating, etc., etc. And what strikes me, by the way, is that Felix is a progressive, he's a leftist, and I always say that the left also played a huge role in portraying these images, and so the impact is huge. Yeah. It really defined how a lot of Dutch people looked toward these disadvantaged neighborhoods. Yeah, so these frames.
Yeah. Were you ever hesitant to again kind of bring these images into life? You know?
Yes, this problem was there from the start of this project, and I also always try to like find another perspective. Or I also I met like a guy from northern Cameroon. Yeah. I was also researching a bit about this Rui Guardi character, and I filmed scenes with him in the archive, but it was never. Never really felt comfortable to include it in a way. And
do you feel comfortable about your own film?
It took some time.
Okay,
but yeah, I can explain the methods that I used and why it is like that. But if you use colonial images, there's always the question about reproducing it, or and especially in my film, there's no real counter perspective. No. So I try to find
why.
I think for me, as a white filmmaker, I felt more comfortable to really look at it in my really research my own white history, and doesn't and create an experience for the viewer where it opens up like a filmic reflection, and the viewer is addressed itself and has to find his position to all these thoughts and images, and not to be moralistic in the first case. And I think it felt more productive to me than just to say this is not right, or this shouldn't be like this, or but I try to research, like in this archive, I try to search like small gesture of emancipation or resistance, and to put it put that also into place.
Yeah, I want to show a clip now from your film where we hear Rui Guardi really talk about his view on a changing, I don't know if it's still Cameroon, I think so, and his thoughts on this. And I think the images give a complete other, are very counterintuitive to what he says. And can we see clip number 4?
Niemand weiß eigentlich, wie man dem Bruder im Busch helfen kann, wie man seinen Sozialstand heben könnte, wie man seine Seuchen, die Krankheiten, all das bekämpfen könnte und seinen Lebensstandard wirklich heben, ohne dass man gleichzeitig die altafrikanischen Kulturen dabei zerstört. Denn all das, was bis jetzt Wert hatte und wertvoll war für diese Leute, all das geht gleichzeitig mit dem Eindringen der neuen Zeit bis in die entfernteste Ecke Afrikas hinein, geht nun gegenwärtig zugrunde. Alle diese Märkte, die sind mit dem gleichen europäischen billigsten Kitsch und Tand überschwemmt. Von irgendwelch afrikanischem Handwerk ist nirgends mehr eine Spur. Man verführt die Käufer mit glitzerndem Ramsch und wirklich mit Ramsch und schafft ständig künstlich neue Bedürfnisse. Hier sehen Sie eine vollständige, würdelose Angelegenheit. Der Mann, der vorhin auftauchte, trägt einen ganz knallroten Mantel. Da sehen Sie Burschen in europäischen Matrosenblusen. Da hat die Wohltätigkeit stattgefunden, indem gute Wohltätigkeitsdamen aus Europa, die haben Kleider nach Afrika geschickt. Die Leute haben ja nichts. Und so verwandelt man diese stolzen Bergbauern zu vollständigen Karikaturen. Warum, Himmels Willen, brauchen Sie das? Warum müssen Sie all diesen europäischen Tand und diesen europäischen Plunder bekommen? Warum führt man sie ständig in Versuchung? Heutzutage findet man nirgends mehr die alten Tücher. Überall ist nun diese Überschwemmung mit neuen Stoffen, die hier getragen werden, mit Motiven, die so durchaus nicht afrikanisch sind.
Yeah, so I was thinking, I mean, the frame that Rui Guardi uses is extreme, you know, but Kivu, Sinan, can you make a documentary film without a frame? Like, is that possible without the frame of the director?
No, but I think it all starts with this awareness about the multiple stories that you can tell about one specific context or people or whatever, a situation. I mean, this is very almost classical stuff that we're seeing here, right? The other that has this is close to nature. It's about authenticity. The other that should be helped, etc., etc. Very classical racist tropes also, where the other has to be emancipated, helped, the white man's burden, etc., etc. But I know that, you know, again, coming back to the documentary of Felix and Mischa Hedinger, I know that a lot of filmmakers would repeat the movie that was made 20 years ago, and they would still tell this particular one-sided story about these neighborhoods. And so I think it first starts with you know, being accountable also about, I would say, your relationship to your subjects, to the topic, and make that explicit. I know that in film that there are many other choices to be made, aesthetical choices, etc., etc. But there's one thing I want to say before you give Kivu the word. But what struck me was that in Kivu's clip, you know, he asserts himself in the context, and it's reflective, and he positions himself. Whereas, you know, there's this classical fly on the wall position also you can take, where the filmmaker is more objectivist, rational, and not part apparently of relationships. And I think this is very, very problematic. And just to zoom out, you see this everywhere.
But are you saying at IDFA that the fly on the wall technique is kind of, I think, you know, should be out of the door?
I'm not here deciding. I'm not an authority on what people can and should not do, and people are free to do whatever. But I think it's very problematic in terms of the type of stories that are being told and distributed and more easily accepted, etc., etc. Because there are certain power dynamics that are at work, whether you have very good intentions as a personal filmmaker. And you know, just one example, I see this tendency also in academia, where you can have women or anthropologists of color who, you know, their work is very auto-ethnographic. It's reflective. They position themselves in their research context. But even this demand also seems to be unequal, because it is marginalized people who seem to have to carry this burden of being explicit about their role, whereas the norm then still remains whiteness, because that's the context in which you are navigating and maneuvering. And in my own, I did a research in the Netherlands on racial profiling, and just because I'm the one who did that research, I'm seen as partisan because I have Turkish background. And I know that this same question is never asked to white anthropologists, right? They're not, because there's this ideal type that whiteness is the norm, objective, etc., etc. So bringing it back to filmmaking, I think it's important to be aware of the structural context in which individuals are doing their best.
And first you want to respond, maybe?
I was just curious about the mise en scène of those characters, because I mean, do they have a pipe and sunglasses all the time, or did the director ask them to put up a show and, I mean, perform a little bit? I mean, the mise en scène from the director and the self mise en scène, because I mean, the presence of a camera in a small town in rural Africa in the 50s, and when those objects were quite rare. It's the same way sometimes when we see pictures of our grandparents in a studio in Black Africa. We see them super stylish, but they were not always stylish. They would sometimes even kind of perfume themselves before going to the studio, because the photographer would come to the village like once every 6 months. Yeah, so so I was just curious about
about the context of this scene. The film uses a lot of different material, TV programs, radio programs, and these are texts and articles and diary entries and a lot of 16mm rolls and tape recordings. And in this scene, this is taken from one TV program that was broadcasted in Germany in VDR, and I not always really know a lot about the circumstances, but like in the first extract, we really see how he did the mise en scène, and there was some resistance from local people, and then he tried to get other ones to.
I had the feeling more here that they weren't doing what he wanted to do.
And here he was just. Frustrated that things change and people are dressing differently, but he was not at all realizing that he was thinking that was un-African, but he didn't realize that these were also symbols of independence and all these movements. But I can't tell you exactly why he's having a pipe or
well, my experience is filming lots of public manifestations in London, the demonstrations, the Pride Parade, the anti-Trump protests, right-wing extremists. Sometimes when you point a camera somewhere and then people instantly start performing, it's almost inevitable. And then and at some time I'd have to kind of like turn off the camera to, or tell them, look, do you really want to portray yourself like this? Are you overdoing things? Or because I observed you for like 15 minutes, and the moment you saw my camera, then you started putting on a show. And then so sometimes it's me trying to making a conscious effort to produce a fresh gaze.
Yeah.
But again, I'm very much aware of my powerlessness because my fresh gaze has to be digestible to audiences. And then most of the time,
in what way then is the subject of the film also the owner of the film? Like, is there this interaction between, you know, the ones that are filmed and the ones that is filming? Is the subject of the film also in a part the owner of the film or not?
That's a beautiful idea, but ultimately, what happens in the edit room, and then there's very little that the people who are being portrayed are going to have to do with the final propos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Filmmakers are just way too powerful, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it's a bit frightening.
One of the most powerful people. I was thinking, because you also made artistic films, and I think it was also said at the festival as a whole, like we also really should see documentary as a form of art, you know, and the artistic side of it. And then I thought, how does this artistic side relate to this subject? For example, you are very clear about, you know, people have to, you know, make almost a disclaimer about why they're filming, what they're filming, and what their position is. And I can imagine that if you want to make, you know, more like an artistic documentary, that you want to keep that stuff out. Is there, you know, you think, a tension between artistic work and being very clear for what you stand for?
Yeah, I think there is some kind of tension there, but obviously, like scientific research, for example, it's not the same thing that a film. And a film uses media, and is, like you also said, and media is in a way a really manipulative kind of way of telling stories or going after reactions of an audience. So I think there are differences, and it's a fine balance, I think. But you have to have both approaches in your mind and think a lot about all these questions. But in the end, I think, yeah, art has other maybe forces, can do some stuff that is not possible in research, or in for example, in my film, I can't really. It's not possible to not reproduce some stuff, but if I use images. But maybe in a text you can have a totally different approach, and but I also think both have their pros and cons, and but what I can create is a more maybe more confrontal kind of reaction from the audience. And like you said in the early at your first statement, confrontational stuff can also like create something positive, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, from the title of the film, when I say EUROPA, based on a true story,
yeah.
I'm already making a statement. I mean the quotation mark, because I never want to claim absolute accuracy or an absolutely clear picture of a scene or a situation or an event, because that's practically impossible. It's philosophically impossible to have a full picture of any scene, any community, any event in history. And then that's why sometimes documentaries tend to, in my humble opinion, tend to put such a heavy burden on themselves of this accuracy. So I take loads of liberties with, like in my work.
And,
with,
do you see that as artistic freedom?
Artistic freedom is also kind of like something that I throw at everybody just to... it's... I'll find a better word later.
Yes.
Yeah, let's call it artistic freedom for now. Like 40 minutes later, when I find the right term,
yes, I will get back to it.
Just to add to this, I mean, earlier I didn't want to suggest that there is one way of telling that story. Not at all. And I think that that's one element that comes in this discussion. It's about the responsibility of the filmmaker, right? And what the filmmaker can do. And I think that, we agree that the camera isn't neutral. It isn't objective, and whatever cultural product it is, it's about what are you showing, and what are you leaving away, and what story are you telling. So and then you can have a lot of discussion about the responsibilities and all the ethical aspects of filmmaking, documentary making, and what the documentary maker has to think about. But then there is another dimension, right? Because that is already setting up certain parameters. That's what the individual can do. But the larger question is, what stories are actually allowed to be told? Which stories are given attention? Yeah. Which stories are shared, shown, liked?
I know.
And that's the broader structural question, I think. And then then this question is directed to a completely different audience.
Yeah. So you provide me an excellent bridge to the next clip I want to show to talk about those structural relations or influences. So the next clip, please.
This shot was captured on the Sony A7S Mark II camera. I long hesitated to make a film with this camera because I dreaded the reaction of my colleagues who would be surprised to see me shoot my third feature film with a semi-professional camera. This shot was captured on the Red Scarlet camera. This camera kit reassures my professional collaborators. They immediately understand that this is a serious production, that I am a serious and ambitious African filmmaker. These matters are not trivial. I, an African filmmaker with an African passport, cannot survive a third feature film that does not look professional enough, unless the said film was so thematically important to the point that critics and programmers would be willing to overlook its flaws. As far as I can remember, I had always wanted to make a Rwandan film set in a European country, the same way a French filmmaker can make a French film set in Zimbabwe or India. I would show up, candid, emotionally unprepared, and I would film people in a quasi-anthropological way while making sure that I place my African concerns front and center of the film. But there exists absolutely no funding for African filmmakers with an African passport to make films beyond the boundaries of geographical Africa. The eligibility criteria of all available funds for a filmmaker with a profile similar to mine are clear about it. My well-meaning professional friends were advising me to stay in my assigned lane and to make a third feature film set in Africa with universal themes. I had one in mind, about infidelity in a couple, a rather banal and universal theme. But the story would be set in a European city, and the title would be A Tree Has Fallen, and a very clear set of images were rolling in my head. A woman in love on the way to meet her lover, her jealous ex-husband spying on her, and the Nigerian lover who would eventually be murdered. So, a film about death.
Can I tell you something?
And the central question of the film would be, when Africans die in Europe, where do their spirits wander? Which spaces do they haunt? It was obvious that a film about ghosts could only begin with the poem Spirits by the Senegalese poet Birago Diop.
Yeah, so I saw this and I thought, well, I think you touch upon maybe the biggest problem in this discussion, and that is, the funding and the platform. And as you state, there is no funding for an African filmmaker to make a movie outside of Africa. Yeah, what is the question? Because it's so obvious that this is a big problem. Is this? Yeah, have you always encountered this? Do you see some sparks of change
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, it's probably getting worse because sadly, filmmakers from the South, the global South, whatever that means, we have to come to the Hubert Bals Fund to get a little bit of like development money, or go to the CNC in France, or go to the World Cinema Fund in Germany. And those monies most of the times come from sources that have clear lists of beneficiary countries, and so like this money you'll have to spend it in Africa, for production, and post-production money you'll have to spend it in Europe. So. And then now with cultural budget cuts all across Europe, so these sources are kind of like drying up as well. So the problem is getting worse. And then I've always wanted to make films in India, in South Korea. There's one I was trying to develop in Brazil, but it's impossible. And I had so many like set in Europe, written, developed treatments, but the sources of the existing funding opportunities say very clearly this money has to be spent in Africa. So I'm not allowed to have an opinion on these wonderful times Europe is going through.
Yeah. And could you explain a bit more? Why has it to be spent in Africa? Why do you think it is like that?
Because my quick chat that I had, for example, with a funder that I'm not going to name here, like 2 days ago, was like, look, we don't want to give German taxpayers money to go and be spent in London.
So, and if you would like hire a complete Rwandan crew, base them in London, would then they be satisfied?
Nope.
No.
First, so it's very clear. First of all, the Rwandan crew wouldn't get a visa to begin with. So it's just, a lot of issues that make it impossible for me to have any opinion on matters of the world, especially matters of the West. While I've helped so many crews, incompetent directors, uneducated directors from all around, the West, coming, and then I was in charge of helping them come and document my community in Rwanda. So I wanted to claim the right to go and do the same.
Yeah, I was thinking, and maybe this is a very naive question, but I know that first of all, I know Rwanda is not a real function democracy, but I know they're on the forefront of many new, technologies, environmental laws, and how is it culturally? Like, aren't Rwandans really interested in the government, in how Rwandans think about Europe? And isn't there, almost a budget, so you're not dependent on the Western money anymore?
Well, we're still, as a nation, I guess, we're still busy trying to build clinics and bridges and roads. And but there's been a very sustained effort to colonize the minds of the new, at least the members of the civil society, as in just demystify the French, demystify the Belgians. They're no better than you. They're not just because they come with big cameras or just because they come with fancy degrees. I mean, they're no better than you. So it's been, it's done in a very chaotic and sometimes reactionary way.
But wouldn't it be interesting then if you can show, the chaos in the West right now?
Yeah. I intend to.
Okay.
I intend to actually dub the film in Kinyarwanda, if possible, and then I would do exactly what the director in your film was doing, and I was like, okay, these are the Europeans. This is how they fight in the streets. This is how they, this is
but
when
we laugh
this is how
about
they get
it.
drunk.
But maybe it's crazy that why do we laugh about this? Because it looks like the world upside down, but maybe it's time. Right?
I was doing exactly the same thing. These are Europeans in the street. Here, they're angry at what the government decided to do and that they voted for themselves. Here, them claiming so that's basically what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
And I was also injecting in my concerns, front and center, had to be front and center. The same way Europeans come in and make a film in Africa, and then you see like the main character or the major question asked in the film is a European question, or is a question. So I wanted to do the same thing, and the ghosts are too important to be left to horror film directors. It's like I have to throw in ghosts as well, because I care about ghosts, and so.
Looking forward to that.
But do you see this are you really on the forefront of this, I would almost say, battle, or do you see it more broader, that filmmakers from the South really have to look for other sources of funding to make the films they want to make?
I think we have to demystify the process of filmmaking, because films, the budgets sometimes are way too inflated. At some point, like, do you really need all this? Do you need 7 years to? Do you need to go to 7 labs? Being told, kind of dissecting the story over and over again, and then so we need to demystify the process, and we need to lighten up the process of making films, and we need to make them more and more personal, and we need to get rid of.
And sorry, demystify in order to
be able to liberate ourselves and understand that, look, you can actually make a decent film without having to go through the dreaded point system where you have to get a French crew to come and then be at the key, like in the key departments, like camera, editor, because sometimes like, is that film still yours? And then you're not funding it, materially, like practically shooting it.
So can I say there's also almost this kind of Western way of how to make a documentary, which also kind of needs to, that is what you say, demystified, and maybe come another schools of making documentaries.
Demystify and disrupt, but again, I don't know how. The trouble is that like this is maybe not sustainable, and then I'm not going to be able to sell the film. Maybe, I don't know, because. Again, the way films are sold, sometimes it's you got development money, so at the end, so the distributors get funding to distribute your film. So courage or disruption is definitely not rewarded in the industry. So
have you? How is it going so far here these days? Meeting people.
It's tap on the shoulders and a lot of politeness.
Okay, I think that one is noted. Okay, I'm at the where do we go part, but I think you already had some interesting input in where to go. But then if I go to the other speakers, like my question was, is there a correct way of filming the other? But you have answered it by saying yes, but being very conscious of your own position. And then I thought, but can you be conscious? It always seems that people 20 years later, when they look back on their work, they're like, ooh, that was really stupid of me. Because when they're in the moment or in the, can you be aware of your position and your context when you're part of it?
I think you can, and I think that awareness starts in some type of collision or confrontation. Or mirror in whatever shape or form. So I think it can, and what I started off saying, this idea of people are starting to talk back, returning the gaze is what you are saying. I think that is definitely happening right now. And you see it in different places. But I was also, this is just a thought. I think that then there's this other stage, or the next stage of returning the gaze, because returning the gaze can also be returning the favor, right? And returning the favor in the sense of also portray. So before I finish that thought, when I look at the title "Filming the Other," who the other is constantly changing and can be different other people. And I would make the claim that the other can be white people as well, And that white people can be othered in a way as well and portrayed in a one-sided way, etc., or any group of people. And
but does it also maybe mean that people should maybe start making movies about only themselves and their own communities?
No. That's definitely not what I'm saying. No, that's definitely not what I'm saying. But what I'm trying to say is that but break it up. Look at the ambiguities, particularly in artistic process, the multi-layeredness, the fact that things are never static, that it changes, and start from this, and then again the awareness that multiple stories can be told. When I look,
do you feel, because multiple stories can be told, but we've also heard, well, it can't really, because there's no funding or no platform to it. So do you feel that all those different stories can be next to each other, or do you think there has to need some radical change, or like white Western filmmakers really have to take a step back, to create a new space?
Yeah, so this is a topic that keeps coming back, and that's why I wanted to make this comment about the structural context. I think it's important to keep individual filmmakers to look at that, to look at their own responsibilities. But there is also this tendency then to I see this elsewhere, at least, to individualize things too much. Whereas, I would say the real power wielders are the producers and are the ones who are about, which stories can be told. So I think it makes more sense to shift blame to that part. But I'm not arguing away individual responsibility. Right, there is individual responsibility.
Should be both.
Well, yes, but prioritizing the structural context.
Yeah. Do you agree with that? Or?
Yeah, I think these are not two completely different sides of it. You have to think on both levels, on the structural level and on the individual level. And what I try to do with my film also is just to, what is I think really important for documentary filmmaking in general, is just to reflect on the thought that what you film, the people, landscapes, everything, often has more to do with yourself than the people that you portray or the landscapes that you film. And so you should always really reflect on why do I want to see that? Why is this important to me? And has it to do with me and my own desires and my own problems or my own weakness?
I find it so funny that you say that, because you keep yourself completely out of your movie.
Yeah. But still, I was thinking a lot about that stuff. I try to do it in a different kind of way. I try to use found footage of Switzerland's past to think about these
because
kind of questions.
Because it's also your past, of course.
Yeah, it's my past, but I also don't want to. Because I think these thoughts are also in myself, and I experienced that when I was filming, for example, in Burkina Faso, but also if I'm just filming somewhere in Switzerland, it's often the same questions that you want to see something, and you want to see that a specific thing will happen, and why do you really want to see that, and what has it to do with yourself, and just always take a step back and think about your own involvement in these kind of questions.
Well, I'm very curious then also about your new film. I don't know if there's already a new film, but how how you will position yourself in your new film, and if you can still will it be a film about you. I mean, can you still film the other and not be aware of all, not be hindered maybe by all those thoughts that you have right now?
I think I'm not that. There are films where I reflect on stuff like that, and there are other films where, it always comes from the mind, but it also comes from from just doing stuff. I don't want to think too much that I can't do anything anymore. So I'm not really worried about that. But it's always both, and then there's a time to reflect, and then there's a time to shoot, there's time to reflect, and then it's editing, and so there's enough time for everything. So I don't worry too much about that.
Well, when at the beginning of this talk, I was saying that I make it clear to the audience that I'm aware of my inabilities and my position.
Mm-hmm.
It was not just an empty disclaimer to allow myself anything.
Yeah.
I think the notion of sincerity in our work it's not lame. It's as in when there's empathy and when there's a sincerity, and then a clear effort to understand and proven effort to reach the highest levels of scientific rigor in whatever we're doing. I think that we can film and we can go anywhere and we can, So those disclaimers shouldn't be there just to,
To do whatever then you would like.
Yeah. So I think the notion of sincerity is very important.
Yeah.
It's not lame. It sounds like a lame word, but it's not.
No. So before we're gonna go to kind of conclude this with each other, are there still questions from the audience? Please talk in the mic.
Well, it's a very interesting discussion, but I don't want to rain on your parade. But you said at the beginning that it's only in recent years that this discussion has been started. But just in the anthropology, in visual anthropology, I'm a filmmaker and an anthropologist. This discussion is about 50 years old, and I was for 6 years the director of a film festival, and I happened, pure coincidentally, I'm writing now in a debut book, Whose Story Is It? We had it at the festival, it was about Whose Story Is It? And Sinan, he mentioned the fly on the wall documentaries, etc., but probably people will also know that a great man in visual anthropology, David McDougall, wrote an article in 1975, beyond observational cinema. He said the filmmaker should be included also in the story. And later on, he said, you don't have to be there personally or to tell it, but in the way you film, you can have see that there was someone in charge. And the whole idea of that anthropology of anthropologists or white filmmakers are only appropriating images can be overcome in several ways. And I'm sure a lot of people will know Jean Roust, a French filmmaker, who said he talked about shared anthropology and shared cinema. And he was making films with people from Niger together. He made documentaries and films which were a mix of feature film and documentaries. He took them to Paris. As anthropologists, they were filming there. So what I want to say is it's a discussion which is old, which comes back sometimes, but just in the field of anthropology, which was sometimes accused of appropriating images, there started the discussion about reflexivity and about the role of the filmmaker involved and how you can overcome making the other to an other, because what Sinan said was right. The other can be everywhere, and it is the otherness that we are creating sometimes with Orientalism or whatsoever, and that's the basic idea. And if you point,
can I say something to this, Mirthe? Because I really like your comment, and I have to think about Sunny Bergman's documentary. It's a Dutch filmmaker, female. And she made 2 documentaries, one on racism and one documentary on blackface, Black Pete figure. And the interesting thing is, I just want to add a layer, is that her style, I'm not sure if it's conscious, whatever, but her style is that she inserts herself in the story. And it's very reflective and it's very self-critical. But then again, you have the audience reception. And I know that some audiences thought that because she was inserting her in her movies on these topics in particular, that she was actually centering the discussion towards herself as a white woman. So this is also very tricky, right? I know that this was her line of reasoning and motivation for choosing for this specific style, aesthetically or even in terms of just the storytelling. But the audience reception was mixed because it was seen as centering whiteness. So it's.
And I was thinking when you were saying that, yeah, okay, this has been a very, very long discussion, but I think what is added now is that who has the right to film the other, and that maybe Kivu has explained very much that that the half of the world almost does not have the same rights to reflect on the other. Is that more the discussion now than which you, or does it also feel for you as a very old discussion?
Yes, but I like to be strategic in my blaming game.
A strategic blaming game, yes,
yeah.
I love
so
it.
So as in when we complain sometimes about the soft power of former colonial powers of France or Belgium, and it's not even soft power, actually it's very hard power, because it's really, it's our brains, it's the way we bury our dead, the way we get married, the way we kiss, everything. We copy these former colonizers. And then so if in 2019 we haven't understood that we need to give ourselves the tools and the means to be a little bit more in charge of our cultural expressions, then we haven't got our priorities in order. When we're investing so much in reaching these middle class goals, I mean, trying to realize dreams that didn't spring up in our heads or in our subconscious, then we're getting something seriously wrong. Because most of the time when I hear of the HBF having 2 million euros as a budget to fund films from 50 countries, it's 2 million euros is really nothing. So,
what, sorry?
2 million euros to overhaul a cultural the cultural scene of a country. It's really nothing. If we're not understanding that we need to invest in cultural policies and in our intellectuals and researchers and artists in expressing themselves, then so that's what I meant by strategically blaming. Yeah. So I'm tired of complaining to
Western
HBF not having enough money or sense and not giving me money to go to a French village and film. It's they don't owe it to me.
Okay. Other question? Yeah, in the middle. Strategically sitting.
Gracias. I hope my English is enough for me to explain my question. For me, in my idea, to have a camera always creates a desequilibrio, how do you say? Unbalanced power relationships. So for me, the question, rather than filming the other entitlement or privilege, for me, it would be more something like how can the people with camera can be allies, aliados. Allies, not towards the person or the community they're showing in their film. I specifically mean white privileged people, no, behind the camera. I don't know if I was clear.
Yeah. So I was filming right-wing protests in London, and then so many times I had to just kind of look, I'm because if I'm seeing people with who couldn't afford dental care, for example, and who are missing 50% of their dentition, and then who are screaming things in the front of the camera, it's I understand that. I mean, is that really what I want in my film? And sometimes I would put aside my camera and then tell them, why did you just start like yelling in the camera, or I mean, what are you trying to achieve? Who are you? And yeah, so it's not. I don't know if it's being an ally of right-wing extremists from South London, but again, it's me understanding that I'm. They might be white, but I'm middle class, black, cosmopolitan. I travel whenever I want, wherever I want, and then I have to understand that there's an imbalance there. I can't just go and put the camera in their mouth, which is like severely like diseased. So it's yeah. So I get what you say, and
is it that you almost desensationalize your subject?
Yeah, I think it's very important.
Yeah.
To not just go and pick the caricatures of especially like me knowing that I at that particular moment I might be physically vulnerable. I might have greater physical vulnerability, but I think I have much more power. I mean, compared to this person who's in front of me
because of the camera.
Not just because of the camera, but it's also in the which part of London are you? Which side of the street? I mean, how are you dressed? What accent do you have? Because if I had a South London accent, maybe they would have felt different towards me. But because I have a different, maybe indescribable accent, and and what kind of camera am I holding, and then this person, I mean, clearly they're not educated, and then they think that I'm. Yeah, so it's all these like power games, and that are very clear from the beginning. We suspect them, and then we get confirmation as we interact with those subjects.
Yeah. Maybe last question, 2 more questions, and then we wrap up.
Thank you. So I wanted to ask you, so I am also Iranian, so I share all these stories and I understand them, but what do you think about the rise of China as a political, the economic power now? Do you think that will change all this Western dominance to the culture and the way that they produce our movies and then they show it and then they somehow tell us what to make about our countries? Like from Iran, they need misery of Iranian women, or from Africa, they might need poverty or whatever. How do you see this? Will this change with rise of China as a dominant power in the world?
Do you? Kivu, like get your funding from, get also, right, I mean, I understand your funding from China?
We will have to make movies for Chinese soon, yeah?
We
have been making movies where monkeys are Western people till now. Now probably we will be belong to Chinese from now on in the future. They are dominating everywhere.
I think there's a lot of, do you say xenophobia? I think there's all these fantasies of China coming and just like ransacking, like fragile Africa. What is
honestly,
sorry, go ahead. No, sorry. I insist.
Well, I just think that I don't have a very clear reflection of China. What I do have a clear reflection on is that certain frames and images are changing and at the same time quite historically stable, whether it's images on women or certain continents or a Muslim man, whatever. So I honestly don't think that Chinese dominance is necessarily going to destabilize that. I'm not saying that these images cannot change. I'm saying that they have some sort of consistency and robustness. So I don't know. I don't see a.
Those people need another image. If Chinese take over, they need another image.
But probably take over what?
They do economically. When they take over economically, they will take over culturally. Yeah, they will fund movies. They will distribute. There are 1 billion audiences there, and then they need another image of us. I don't know what. Just think about it. I'm just asking question. Asking myself now.
It's thought-provoking question, for sure.
Let's see on the mic.
I think the Chinese might have as much economic power, but we're not trying to dress like them, to speak like them. We're not kissing. So there's this like the West still has a hold on our psyche and on our cultures that the Chinese are probably not going to achieve, or maybe they're going to achieve it in thousands of years. So I'm really not worried about us kind of rebranding ourselves to please Chinese audiences. And I mean,
you also don't see it as an opportunity, like, oh, maybe the Chinese are really wanting to see my reflections on, you know, white people and their street parades?
I'm very pragmatic, and I'll accept Chinese money gladly if you tell me where to find it. And it's an opportunity. I mean, here's a new superpower, and then and we have very little interaction historically with this superpower. I mean, the opportunities are just massive. Yeah. To have a dialogue and to challenge each other and to try and enter this new world as very unequal partners, certainly. But yeah, but I think the opportunities are amazing. Yeah.
Clear.
But I don't like falling into this like fantasy of China taking over. Yeah. I really think it's a dangerous thing to. Like that, yeah. Sometimes there's this like phobia of the Chinese coming, and they might be taking more of Greece than they're taking Zimbabwe.
Yeah. Last question.
So, filming the other can obviously be done in a negative way, but it could also be done in a positive way, and a lot of scholars have deemed that as positive racism. And can you guys talk a bit about that? What? Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't really get your question. Could you?
So we were mostly talking about. I mean, there were examples of filming the other in a negative way, right? Yeah. But it could also be done through a positive way, and that has its ramifications as well. And what are they? And it's more of a discussion. It's not necessarily like a question. I'm just trying to incite something.
Are you meaning to tell if you try to like idealize or romanticize people? And I
mean, it's I don't have any intentions with my question, but I guess I would say the idealization can be a negative thing, but it could also be done positively, I assume, but it could also be racist if done so.
Yeah, of course. And especially in my film, it's a lot about that, in fact, because he was like searching for something completely different in Switzerland and trying to find like some kind of dreamland where he could go out of conservative Swiss society and has his own kind of freedom, which of course has nothing to do with the freedom of people in the north of Cameroon where he went to, and he really, in my case, it was all about romanticizing, idealization, and all that stuff. On the one hand, but on the other hand, also about like white superiority and racism. So these things can go together quite easily, and this is maybe shocking to some people. And so I would agree to that statement that this is, of course, also a problem. And also in nowadays documentaries and. A lot has changed, but a lot has not changed, and there's still like people going somewhere and trying to idealize like landscapes and people, and so I think it's also important to think about that. And what I also would like to mention maybe is because we were starting to talk a bit about economics, and I think it's very important to also think about that, especially also if this question, can we be allies, or can we give voice to like people that are underprivileged, And of course, we have to do that, and we can't do it maybe otherwise. But for me, it's hard to say if we really can, if there can be like an equal kind of way to look at each other, if the financial situation is completely different, and if the economics are so unbalanced, or this is just a question that I often ask myself: is it even possible, you know? And in the end, a lot has to do with economics. Or I believe it's like that, yeah.
But I think if this being ally, sometimes it comes from like a very paternalistic position. Sometimes like, I'm part of yeah. Huh?
I'm your friend.
Yeah, I'm the powerful friend here, but I accept you, and then I feel for you. And I think maybe sometimes we don't need to. Maybe what we need is just to be reasonable. It's like be reasonable filmmakers, and being reasonable is, taking a lot of aspects of the societies we live in into consideration before working, and some economic aspects of the film industry. Yeah, so I think just being reasonable is already a noble enough goal, in my opinion. And then, the rest sometimes is too much romanticism and veiled sexism or kind of like performative like allyship, if that's the word. So yeah, so if you're reasonable enough, I don't think you need to.
But you also had this other word like sincerity, reasonable and sincerity, maybe. I have to close the talk, but I knew you would still give me another word for artistic freedom. So,
the cocktail tonight.
What?
The drinks tonight.
Other drinks. Okay. So we have to wait to tonight for to hear the other artistic freedom. Did you wanted to add something to conclude?
Just a very brief comment. When you make this comment, not just thinking in terms of racism, of racializations, but I also think about how the other is portraying the other or setting up the other. And, in the Netherlands, I see, for instance, filmmakers, artists, but also fiction writers of minority, but with minority background, who also fall in this trap of portraying minorities in a positive way. And I was just yesterday, 2 days ago, I was watching this clip by the French rapper Kerry James, Banlieusard. And in the clip, you see all these very successful people from racialized backgrounds. People on elite functions or artists, etc., etc. And I was watching the clip, and I was thinking to myself, okay, but this is also setting the bar quite high, right? Is the other not allowed to be just regular and not successful and not this positive example? So I think this is also very tricky. What kind of neoliberalized frames, because here success was seen as something that needs to be achieved, that minorities themselves can also just reproduce and follow.
Yeah. So I don't think if I conclude the discussion, because maybe what you also showed, but this is an ongoing discussion, and what we see, what you said, which is hopeful, is that you see minorities, coming out second and third generations telling their stories, and hopefully this kind of also makes like the dominant filmmakers more aware of their, or more sincere, or more what was the other word? Reasonable. But I think that as long as there is no real platform to hear how people outside of the West reflect on the West, it's really hard to really change your mindset about the others. So I thought that was a very realistic, but also pessimistic view or situation that is going on right now. And maybe since we are at IDFA, something to really think about, how reflections on the West from outside the West be part of the mainstream platforms. So I really want to thank you all three of you, and you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you.